What kind of woman does a man remember? Not with regret, but with reverence. Not because she clung, not because she sacrificed herself to be chosen, but because she embodied something he couldn't forget. Have you ever wondered why some women seem to vanish from a man's memory, while others are imprinted on his psyche like a watermark on glass, impossible to erase, even with time, distance, or new relationships? This isn't about beauty. It's not about seduction. It's about emotional impact, and the kind of psychological depth that leaves a mark not on the body but on the inner world. We often hear that men forget quickly, that they move on, but that's only partially true, because a man never truly forgets a woman who awakened something real in him, a woman who held her own truth with clarity and who didn't bend herself to fit his wounds. Today, we're not talking about the woman who was convenient, submissive, or endlessly forgiving. We're talking about the woman who interrupted his patterns, who simply by being herself made him look at his own reflection differently. This conversation is not about becoming unforgettable for the sake of ego or conquest. It's about understanding what makes a woman respected, even in her absence. A woman remembered not for how she made him feel desired, but for how she made him feel accountable. Sigmund Freud once said that the mind does not forget what the heart cannot release. And in the depths of male psychology, shaped by early attachments, maternal impressions, and unconscious longing, there lies a blueprint of the ideal woman, an image many men chase without ever fully understanding why. So what is it about certain women that makes them unforgettable? Why do some stay in a man's psyche years later as a quiet ache, not of loss, but of reverence? In this exploration, we'll enter the inner corridors of the male mind. We'll decode how early experiences form the unconscious ideal of the feminine, why men project these ideals onto certain women, and how women who embody emotional truth and integrity provoke not just desire, but transformation. And maybe, just maybe, you'll come to see that your power was never in being chosen. It was in choosing yourself, so fully, so unwaveringly, that he had no choice but to remember you as the one who woke him up. Now let's begin. Before a man ever falls in love, he has already been dreaming of a woman. Not necessarily her face or her voice, but the feeling she gives him. That feeling is ancient, older than romance, older than memory. It was shaped in his earliest years, when he first opened his eyes to the world and found her, the mother. Not just in the literal sense, but in the emotional, energetic imprint of the first woman who held him, soothed him, denied him, fed him, or forgot him. That first woman becomes the blueprint. She is unknowingly transformed into the original archetype, the one that will later define what he seeks, what he avoids, what he clings to, and what he unconsciously tries to heal through every other woman he meets. In Freudian theory, this is no small idea. The inner image of the ideal woman is not built by logic. It is woven by need, by touch, by presence or absence. If his emotional hunger was met with warmth and safety, the feminine is associated with peace. If it was met with coldness, control, or inconsistency, the feminine becomes a terrain of tension, both desired and feared. Later, as an adult, this man may believe he's making rational choices in love, but beneath his preferences for certain smiles or voices or temperaments lies a psychological projection, the shadow of his own unmet needs, still searching for completion. And so when a woman appears who aligns, even unconsciously, with this early ideal, she strikes something profound in him. Not because she is flawless, but because she is familiar. The woman who resembles this internal archetype, in tone, in presence, in emotional temperature, evokes in him something deeper than attraction. She evokes longing, yearning, a strange kind of homecoming, even if she frustrates him, even if she challenges him. She feels like someone he's known forever, though he cannot explain why. And it's in this projection that many relationships begin, not with true seeing, but with overlaying the past onto the present. She is not being loved as herself. She is being cast into a silent role she never auditioned for. The savior, the healer, the redeemer, or, in darker cases, the punisher, the judge, the woman who will abandon him again. This is where it becomes dangerous, because if she lives up to the fantasy, she may be adored, patoured, but not truly known. And if she defies it, she may be punished, not for who she is, but for who she failed to be in his unconscious play. Yet still, even after the relationship ends, she may linger in his psyche. Why? Because her presence was more than real. It was symbolic. She didn't just stir emotions. She touched the original wound. And whether she tried to love him or finally walked away, she becomes unforgettable, precisely because she awakened something unresolved in him. Freud would say, "We do not remember people merely for how they treated us. We remember them for what they represent within us." A woman who fit the mold of his ideal, consciously or not, becomes entangled with his earliest desires and fears. Even years later, her voice may echo in moments of vulnerability. Not because she was perfect, but because she mirrored something he couldn't name. And herein lies the power and the burden of being the projected ideal. You are cherished, but not seen, desired, but not understood. And if you refuse to stay in that role, if you assert your individuality, your limits, your complexity, you may shatter the illusion. But that's precisely what makes you unforgettable, because you weren't a fantasy. You were a mirror. And he may run from that mirror for the rest of his life, but part of him will always remember the woman who refused to be his mother and demanded to be met as herself. So I ask you, are you being remembered for who you truly are, or for the role someone needed you to play? He doesn't know why he wants what he wants, why certain women feel intoxicating and others safe but dull, why he pushes away the ones who love him and chases the ones who withhold, why conflict excites him, why peace bores him. But beneath all these adult behaviors lies something primitive, unresolved and deeply human, the Oedipus complex. Not in the crude or literal sense, but in the psychological structure Freud described. The unconscious emotional entanglement with the first woman he ever loved, and the silent rivalry with the first man he ever saw as competition. As a child, a boy experiences his mother not just as caregiver, but as the center of his emotional universe. She is warmth. She is presence. She is attention, love, mystery, and sometimes absence. And in her gaze he learns who he is, or who he must become to be acceptable. But she is not his. She belongs to someone else, the father figure or another authority who holds her loyalty. And in this triangle something profound is born, an emotional template of longing, jealousy, competition, and confusion. Freud saw this not as pathology, but as a universal phase. Yet when it is not navigated or resolved, especially in homes marked by emotional neglect, absence, or blurred boundaries, the child grows into a man still chasing that original resolution. He looks for the mother in the lover. He repeats the rivalry in his relationships. He becomes emotionally fused or emotionally unavailable. And most tragically, he confuses love with struggle because the earliest love he knew came with confusion, distance, or pain. So what happens when a woman steps into his life? She is not just herself. She is the stage on which his unconscious story continues to play out. If she nurtures him, he may regress. If she challenges him, he may rebel. If she pulls away, he may feel abandoned, not by her, but by the original figure she represents. And thus many relationships are not truly adult. They are replays of unresolved childhood dramas. Two people not seeing each other, but acting out scripts they never wrote, hoping this time for a different ending. But not every woman plays along. Some women see the pattern. They sense the emotional infantilization, the need for mothering disguised as romance, and they refuse to become emotional caretakers. They set boundaries. They hold their ground. They say, "I will not raise a grown man." And it's this refusal that becomes a rupture. Not because she failed him, but because she interrupted the repetition. She broke the loop. Freud would say, the only way out of repetition is awareness. When a man is faced with a woman who refuses to fulfill his unconscious expectations, he is given a rare opportunity to evolve, to see his wounds, to choose a different way of loving, or to blame her, project his unresolved pain onto her, and retreat into denial. But if he chooses the former, if he leans into discomfort, faces his emotional history, and accepts her as separate and whole, then something transformative occurs. She ceases to be a fantasy and becomes a partner, an equal, a mirror, not a mother. And though the relationship may not last, she becomes unforgettable, not because she indulged his patterns, but because she ended them. She made him see the little boy inside himself, not to shame him, but to awaken him, to make space for the man he could become. So I ask you, are you in a relationship with a man or with his unresolved childhood? And more importantly, have you been pulled into a role you never consented to play? There is a kind of woman who doesn't chase being liked. She doesn't try to be easy, agreeable, or emotionally convenient, and paradoxically, or perhaps precisely because of that, she is deeply respected, not just in the moment, but in memory. Not only by those who could meet her fully, but even by those who couldn't. Respect is not something she asks for, it's something she embodies through alignment, the rare and unshakable alignment between what she says and what she lives. This kind of authenticity is magnetic, because most people live fragmented lives, speaking one truth and living another. They say they want intimacy, but avoid vulnerability. They say they want peace, but fuel chaos. They say they want love, but tolerate disrespect. But the authentic woman, she says yes when she means it. She says no even if it costs her approval. And most powerfully, she is willing to be misunderstood if that's the price of staying loyal to herself. Men may be drawn to many things: beauty, softness, emotional familiarity. But the woman who cannot be swayed by manipulation, who does not beg, who does not plead, who does not tolerate half-love, she unsettles them. And yet she lingers in their psyche. Why? Because she is not reactive, she is aware. She doesn't respond from wound, but from clarity. She has felt pain, yes, often deep pain, but she has walked through it, questioned it, and made meaning from it. She has studied her triggers. She has stopped blaming others for her choices, and she no longer confuses love with sacrifice. Freud might say she has done the work of making the unconscious conscious. She does not live as a puppet to past reinforcement, needing to please in order to feel safe. Instead, she has reclaimed the reins of her behavior. Her boundaries are not walls, they are doors. With locks, she chooses to open only to those who can meet her with integrity. She doesn't scream her limits, she enforces them silently. And it is this quiet dignity that men remember long after the noise of passion fades. Because when a woman moves from self-awareness, not insecurity, she becomes a mirror. She reflects not just what's attractive about a man, but what is still immature, not to shame him, but to offer him a choice, to rise or to remain where he is. This is why authentic women are not always adored in real time. They are often misjudged, criticized, even dismissed as too much or too cold. But years later, she returns, not physically, but emotionally, as a symbol of something lost. Not because she changed herself to be accepted, but because she didn't. She is not unforgettable because she catered to ego. She is unforgettable because she confronted it, with calm, with intelligence, with unwavering self-respect. So ask yourself, do you sacrifice truth to be palatable? Do you hide your boundaries to be loved? Do you soften your voice to make others comfortable? Or have you reached the sacred threshold where your inner alignment is more valuable than anyone's approval? Because when a woman becomes deeply herself, not apologetically, not aggressively, but rooted in awareness, her presence demands respect, even from those who weren't ready to give it. Some women are remembered with longing, others with guilt, but a rare few are remembered with reverence, not because they completed a man's story, but because they interrupted it. There is a woman who doesn't just enter his life, she confronts it, not with anger, not with force, but with presence so complete, integrity so unshakable, that her very existence demands that he see himself, perhaps for the first time. She is not a savior, she is a catalyst. And here's what makes her different. She doesn't try to fix him. She doesn't plead for change. She simply refuses to normalize emotional laziness. She holds up a mirror through how she lives, what she tolerates, what she refuses, and he is faced with a choice: grow or lose her. In Freudian terms, she challenges the ego. She pierces the protective illusions he's built around himself. That charm is enough. That performance equals depth, that his wounds justify his behaviors. She doesn't shame his history, but she doesn't let him hide behind it either. She sees the boy inside the man, the one who learned that avoidance is safety, that silence is strength, that control is power. And instead of mothering that boy, she demands the presence of the man. This is not a romantic ideal, it is psychological friction. And transformation always begins in friction. Because when a man meets a woman who lives from truth, not trauma, when he feels the weight of her emotional maturity, her earned wisdom, her refusal to entertain games, he experiences a kind of internal rupture, not all at once, but over time, he realizes that he cannot remain who he was and still stand beside her. It's not her beauty that haunts him, it's her clarity. It's not her affection he misses. It's the version of himself he began to glimpse in her presence, the version he hadn't yet become. This is why some women become permanent emotional imprints, not because they made themselves indispensable, but because they made themselves real. They didn't demand transformation. They provoked it, through example, not pressure. And whether he grew or not, whether he chose her or stayed in his old patterns, her impact remains. Because she didn't only represent love, she represented what he could be if he dared to meet her in full. That is the woman who lives in emotional memory, not because she was flawless, but because she awakened him to a version of love that was rooted in accountability, freedom, and depth. A love that didn't suffocate or rescue, but that required him to stand up and show up. A love he may have craved, but wasn't yet equipped to hold. And here is the paradox. Even if he lost her, even if he sabotaged it or walked away, she became the measuring stick for what love could have been, and no one else quite fits the frame. So I ask you, are you trying to be irreplaceable, or are you willing to be transformational, even if that means being remembered, not kept? Because sometimes the most powerful role you will ever play in a man's life is not the one who stayed and made it work, but the one who walked in, changed everything, and left him no choice but to finally meet himself. There are women we remember with nostalgia. There are women we remember with regret. And then there are women who live on, not just in memory but in identity, because after them we are no longer the same. For a man, this kind of woman is not just someone he dated. She is not defined by the years they spent or didn't spend together. She is not reduced to the category of ex. She is the threshold, the woman who made him face the mirror, the one who called forth the man he could become, whether he answered that call or not. She wasn't perfect. She didn't always know what to do, but she knew what not to accept, and that knowing and that refusal to settle is what made her unforgettable. Freud might say that we remember those who disturb our inner structure, not with chaos, but with insight, not with noise, but with meaning. A woman who lives from her core, who knows her emotional landscape, who speaks her truth without apology. She is not easy to digest. She doesn't soothe a man's ego. She summons his soul. And sometimes that summons is too much. Not because she asked for too much, but because she triggered too many parts of him, still unfinished, still afraid, still clinging to comfort. But her impact remains. In the quiet moments, between failed connections and fleeting pleasures, she returns, not with bitterness, not as punishment, but as memory, as symbol, as the question he cannot shake. What would it have taken to keep a woman like that? And for many, the answer arrives too late. But this is not a tragedy. This is a legacy, because a woman's power is not in how long she is held. It's in how deeply she is respected, even in her absence. That kind of woman does not chase permanence. She embodies presence. And that presence marks not just the heart, but the conscience. So if you are, or have been, that kind of woman, the one who spoke when it was easier to stay silent, the one who walked when it would have been safer to stay, the one who saw the pattern and refused to repeat it, then know this: you are remembered, not as a possession, but as a turning point. And if no one ever told you, let me say it now, on behalf of every man who didn't yet have the language to articulate it, your presence changed him, even if he never told you, even if he didn't deserve you, even if he wasn't ready. Because some women don't just love, they awaken, and awakening is irreversible. So now I ask you, have you ever been that woman, the one who was not chosen but who was never forgotten? If so, share your experience in the comments. Let other women know that they are not alone in walking away from what dimmed them. And if you're walking this path now, subscribe and stay close. Here we speak your language: psychological clarity, emotional sovereignty, and the deep liberation of a woman who belongs to herself.